All right, settle in, because we need to talk about Family Guy Season 20, Episode 11, which, let's be honest, felt like it was written by a committee of people who all watched different episodes of the show. We've got Peter forgetting Valentine's Day, which is classic him, but then Lois buys him a Peloton, which is, a choice. And this is all happening while some deeply disturbing cycling instructor is trying to convince people their periods will disappear if they pedal hard enough. Seriously, what is going on? It's like they took a bunch of random ideas and just stapled them together hoping for the best. And the worst part? We're stuck here dissecting it all for you. This episode is a mess, a beautiful, chaotic, profoundly weird mess. And by the end, you'll understand just how deep this rabbit hole goes and why some things should probably stay buried. Prepare yourselves. It's going to be a bumpy ride, much like Peter's experience with his brand new, albeit terrifying, gift. Okay, before we dive headfirst into the absolute chaos that is this episode, can we just take a moment? If you're liking these deep dives into the absurdities of animated TV, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on us deciphering the madness. It's free, it helps us out, and frankly, we need all the support we can get to deal with episodes like this. Seriously, just a click, you're saving yourself future confusion. So this episode, Family Guy Season 20, Episode 11, it's got a lot going on. And by a lot, I mean it feels like 3 different episodes mashed together by a caffeine-fueled intern. On the surface, it's about Peter's usual cluelessness, specifically Peter forgetting Valentine's Day, which, shocker, he does. Lois, bless her heart, tries to be understanding, even buying herself a Peloton, which then leads to this whole ridiculous plotline with a Peloton instructor whose entire personality seems to be based on terrifyingly aggressive fitness advice and a story about almost meeting Adam Levine. It's so bizarre it circles back to being funny, but only because it's so bad. Meanwhile, Peter, in a rare moment of seeming thoughtfulness, gifts Lois jewelry, only for her to immediately spiral into thinking he's suggesting she needs to exercise. It's a classic Family Guy misunderstanding, but it sets up this weird cycling class scenario that just goes off the rails in every possible direction. We've got jokes about people's personal lives, the instructor's questionable methods, and just a general sense of impending doom disguised as cardio.
It's not a tightly plotted story, more like a series of events loosely connected by the character's presence. The writing feels incredibly uneven, with moments that are surprisingly sharp and then others that just fall completely flat, like they ran out of ideas halfway through. Visually, it's standard Family Guy fare, but the pacing is all over the place. Some scenes drag, others feel rushed, and the whole thing leaves you feeling a bit disoriented, like you've been through a chaotic workout yourself. It's not the worst episode they've ever done, but it's definitely not one of the greats. It sits in that awkward middle ground of, meh, it happened. It doesn't push the season forward in any meaningful way, and it's unlikely to be remembered fondly by many. My initial verdict? A disjointed, often nonsensical episode that tries to be too many things at once and ends up being not much of anything particularly good. It's a prime example of the show sometimes just throwing jokes at the wall without a strong narrative backbone holding it all together. The ambition is there to be topical and absurd, but the execution feels, dare I say it, lazy. Let's talk about the Peloton scene, because what even was that? We start with Lois getting this super expensive bike and an even more expensive subscription. The instructor, Cody Spray Tan, and yes, that name is as on the nose as it gets, opens with the line, "Are you ready to pedal so hard your periods go away?" My first thought was, is this Family Guy or a body horror flick? This is where the episode kind of loses me and then picks me up again because it's just so out there. The instructor then goes into this rambling story about almost meeting Adam Levine in Vegas back in 2016, which feels like a very specific, almost too personal tangent for a show that usually thrives on broad, sometimes offensive humor. The idea of someone telling a wildly distracting personal story during a high-intensity workout is a pretty funny premise, but they barely lean into it. It's like they wanted to do a bit about influencers and their weird self-importance, but it just feels unfinished. The contrast between the intense physical exertion and the complete mental detachment of the instructor's story is where the potential comedy lies, but it's not fully realized. I kept waiting for a punchline, a payoff, something more than just, "this is my life." And then Peter, who's also somehow dragged into this torture session, decides he's had enough and tries to bail, opting for a scenic ride, which of course involves stopping for a sausage.
This is peak Peter. He can't handle anything that requires sustained effort or any kind of discipline. Lois is still stuck in the class, suffering through it, and Peter is out there living his best, least productive life. The whole cycling class sequence feels like a commentary on the absurdity of modern wellness culture, where people pay exorbitant amounts of money for experiences that promise transformation but often deliver something else entirely. It's not a deep dive, but it's a jab, and the jab lands with a thud because it's just so ungraceful. What I would have done differently? I would have made Cody Spray Tan a much more sinister character, maybe someone who is actually harvesting the energy from these desperate cyclists for some nefarious purpose. Or make the Adam Levine story way more unbelievable, like he was only separated by a single pane of glass at a clown motel, something to elevate the absurdity beyond just a guy telling a weird story. Instead, it just felt like filler, a way to get Peter and Lois in different places doing different things. It's a moment that highlights how disjointed the episode is, with characters wandering in and out of plot lines that don't really connect. I personally felt a bit cheated. I expected more from a scene set in a fitness class that promised to make your periods disappear. It's a bizarre premise that needed a much stronger comedic payoff, and it just didn't deliver. It's moments like these that make you question if the writers were really paying attention to the stories they were trying to tell, or if they were just checking off boxes on a modern trends list. Then there's the whole near the vent argument scene. Lois gets the Peloton, Peter thinks it's great, and Lois is instantly offended because she interprets it as him saying she needs to exercise. This is such a classic Lois-Peter dynamic. She's trying to be open to his gifts, and he's just Peter. He bumbles through trying to explain he saw it on the Today Show with Hoda and Savannah, and then we get this hilarious little side gag about the third hour with the nonsense people. It's a small detail, but it's those little observations about TV and media that Family Guy does well, even when the rest of the episode is falling apart. The real gem here is the implication that Lois is so insecure or so aware of her own body image that a fitness gift immediately sends her into a defensive spiral. It's a sad commentary on societal pressures, but in true Family Guy fashion, it's played for laughs. The argument itself is short-lived because Peter is, as usual, completely incapable of handling any real emotional conflict. He just throws up his hands and accepts he was stuck. The punchline, though, is when he asks if anyone bet on Valentine's Day in the divorce pool, and Meg gets it. Meg, the eternal punchline, the butt of every joke, somehow wins a bet because she's smart enough to predict relationship failures. It's a bleakly funny moment that speaks volumes about her family's complete disregard for her. She's so used to them being awful that she can profit from it. It's a dark, dark joke, but it lands because it's so true to her character. I'd have loved to see more of Meg in this episode, honestly, just to see her navigate this mess with her usual resigned despair. Maybe she could have been the one to point out the absurdity of the whole situation. But no, she's relegated to a quick gag. It's a shame because her character has so much untapped potential for cynical commentary. The scene is over almost as soon as it begins, leaving you with that lingering feeling of, was that it? The core idea, Peter's cluelessness and Lois's resulting frustration, is solid, but it's resolved way too quickly to have any real impact. It's a setup for a joke, the joke is delivered, and then we move on. There's no real exploration of Lois's feelings or Peter's attempts to genuinely fix it, beyond a half-hearted apology and a deflection. It feels like a missed opportunity to explore their relationship dynamics, even in the show's signature twisted way. Now, let's pivot to something truly wild. Peter's voice suddenly becoming incredibly high-pitched. This happens after Lois's disastrous cycling class, and the explanation is the show's signature brand of medical absurdity, Peloton Balls. Apparently, it's a condition where your testicles get lodged next to your voice box from excessive cycling. It's so outlandish, so medically impossible, that it actually becomes funny. The show even brings in Oliver Platt, who, in a meta-twist, introduces himself by referencing his role in The Three Musketeers and his career choice to only do movies with titles that are also candy bars. This is the kind of meta-commentary Family Guy used to be famous for, and it's nice to see it pop up here, even if it's buried under layers of ridiculousness. The explanation of Peloton Balls, along with other supposed ailments for overweight guys trying to exercise, trapped fart disorder, jump rope tangles, push-up butt, sock skin foot, and jog fog, is pure, unadulterated silliness.
It's a parody of health and wellness gurus, self-help books, and the endless stream of minor inconveniences that people complain about. The idea that Oliver Platt is an authority on these fake conditions, all delivered with a straight face, is what makes it work. He's treated with such gravitas, despite the ridiculousness of the subject matter. It's a clever way to poke fun at the often exaggerated claims made in the world of fitness and self-improvement. What I would have done differently here is lean harder into the Oliver Platt meta-commentary. Maybe have him try to sell Peter a sequel to the Three Musketeers called The Four Musketeers, which is also a type of biscuit. Or have him reveal that Peloton Balls is actually a musical he's been developing. The more layers of self-referential absurdity, the better. The joke is that it's so specific and so bizarre that it almost feels plausible in the Family Guy universe. But the real kicker is that the only cure is gravity, and Peter is encouraged to do something with a lot of needless standing. This leads him to church. Yes, church. Because apparently the solution to testicle-induced voice loss is attending a service where they're renaming amen to a-them, and hymns are now identifying as they. It's such a non sequitur that it's brilliant. The writers clearly had a lot of fun coming up with this whole sequence. It's gross, it's weird, and it's a prime example of the show's ability to take a simple premise and twist it into something completely unexpected. The visual of Peter with his voice changed, and the earnest yet absurd explanation from Oliver Platt is a standout moment of pure Family Guy insanity. Speaking of church, Peter, or rather high-pitched Peter, finds himself in the choir. This is where the episode tries to blend its absurd medical condition plot with a more character-driven story, and it's an attempt. Peter, or rather the voice of Peter, is trying to find a place where he can use his singing talent, because apparently he has singing talent now. He's in church, and they're trying to get a new choir going. The previous choir apparently killed half our congregation during COVID, which is dark even for Family Guy. Peter's performance, which involves him singing a rewritten version of a traditional hymn to make it more dramatic, is surprisingly good, or at least the idea of it is. He turns a solemn religious song into a power ballad, complete with dramatic hand gestures and a rock concert vibe.
The other choir boys, who are clearly meant to be the stereotypical tough Catholic kids, immediately hate him. They see him as an outsider, someone trying to steal their spotlight. Their banter is classic Family Guy, with insults about noodle-armed kids and comparisons to the epic handshake meme. The scene where they mock him and try to intimidate him is where the episode gets really interesting. Peter is genuinely hurt that he's being bullied, and he goes to the priest for advice. The priest, in a moment that is both funny and a little sad, tells him to look on Twitter, because the answer to pretty much all of life's questions are on Twitter. It's a commentary on how we seek answers in the most unlikely and often unhelpful places. The priest also mentions he can't talk to kids alone, a nod to the church's reputation, which is handled with a surprising amount of directness. The Jesus Christ cameo here is pure chaos. They bring in a tanned, skinny Jesus who is immediately mocked for his appearance and his toenails. This Jesus offers forgiveness, but the choir boys are more interested in biblical trivia, like the Old Testament, which leads to more physical comedy. It's a commentary on how people can twist religion for their own purposes, whether it's for attention, for validation, or even for violence. The scene where Peter decides to fight back against the choir boys with the priest's blessing, saying religion's whole deal is violence in the name of a higher power, is incredibly cynical and highlights the show's often bleak outlook on institutions. It's a scene that's both offensive and thought-provoking, depending on your perspective. I would have loved to see more of Jesus' actual divine intervention here. Maybe he could have shown up with a truly epic, universe-shattering song that would have silenced the choir boys and converted them all. Or perhaps he could have revealed that the Peloton Balls condition was divinely ordained as a test of faith for Peter, a spiritual journey disguised as a physical ailment. That would have been a wild twist. This whole church sequence is a roller coaster of dark humor and religious satire, and it's one of the more memorable parts of the episode, even if it doesn't always make perfect sense. Lois, meanwhile, is trying to get her life back on track after her Peloton trauma. She's going on a date with Stewie, who, let's be clear, is still Stewie. She wants to impress the Range Rover moms at a Mommy and Me class, which is a great character detail. Lois is still striving for that suburban perfection, even with her chaotic family.
Stewie, in his usual manipulative way, agrees, but only after Lois promises to wax him to look like Caillou.
This is the kind of detail that makes Stewie such a compelling character, his bizarre requests and his obsession with specific aesthetic outcomes. The entire date is framed through Stewie's perspective, or rather, his attempt to manipulate the situation for his own gain. He's clearly expecting a romantic encounter, or at least a very specific kind of intimacy with Lois, which is deeply unsettling. The whole car seat unbuckling and fishing around for that bottom safety belt is played for maximum awkwardness. The "you know what that means" with the clicking tongue is just no. It's a clear sexual innuendo, and it's applied to a baby. That's Family Guy territory, for better or worse. Lois, however, seems completely oblivious, or perhaps just used to Stewie's eccentricities. She's focused on her own goal of social climbing. The scene where she tells Stewie she's pretty close to done with this, and he interprets it sexually, is a prime example of the show's often uncomfortable humor. The fact that Lois is living with her parents at this point, but they have yogurt, is a funny little detail that adds to the picture of their family's current state. The ending of the date is heartbreaking in a weird way. Stewie is clearly upset when Lois leaves, and he gets to sleep in the big bed with her. It's a moment of genuine affection, albeit a highly inappropriate one given the context of their date and Stewie's earlier intentions. It highlights the complex, often disturbing dynamics within the Griffin family. It also shows how Lois, despite her own ambitions, still has a soft spot for her children, even her diabolical one. I think the scene could have gone in a much darker direction, exploring the true extent of Stewie's desires and Lois's unwitting involvement. Or they could have leaned into the absurdity and had the date be with someone else entirely, and Stewie was just tagging along, providing commentary. But as it stands, it's a disturbing but somewhat typical Family Guy moment that leaves you feeling a little uneasy. It showcases Stewie's manipulative nature and Lois's often misguided attempts to navigate her life. Now, for a quick character check. Peter's voice being high-pitched is a classic Family Guy gimmick, and it leads to some decent physical comedy and a meta-commentary via Oliver Platt. He's mostly a catalyst for the bizarre plotlines. Lois is dealing with her insecurities and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, which leads her down the Peloton and then the mommy and me path. She's the more grounded character, but even she gets swept up in the show's absurdity. Stewie, as always, is the manipulative genius, turning a simple outing with his mother into a potentially sinister encounter. His desire for closeness, twisted as it is a consistent character trait. Meg is a quick gag winner, predicting relationship failures and getting paid for it. It's bleak, but fitting. Chris is mostly absent here, save for a brief mention about athlete's foot spray and Romania, which is a classic Chris non sequitur that doesn't really lead anywhere. Brian is also largely sidelined in this episode, which is a shame because he usually provides the voice of reason or the cynical observer that's needed to cut through the chaos. Let's dig into some of those blink-and-you-miss-it details. First off, the whole third hour with the nonsense people remark about the Today Show. It's a subtle jab at the sometimes fluffier content of later morning show segments, and it's the kind of observational humor that Family Guy used to excel at. It adds a layer of relatability for anyone who's ever flipped through channels and wondered what they were even watching. Then there's the recurring theme of religious satire, from the Atham and They hymns to the questionable Jesus Christ cameo. The show clearly isn't afraid to poke fun at religious institutions, and these little touches add to that overall critique. The name Cody Spray Tan is such a ridiculous, on-the-nose name for a fitness instructor that it's almost too obvious. It screams influencer parody. It's the kind of name that makes you laugh because it's so precisely what it is. And the Peloton Balls explanation, with Oliver Platt detailing other fake ailments like trapped fart disorder and jog fog, is a goldmine of absurdity. It's not just a one-off joke, it's a whole mini-world of made-up medical conditions that adds to the show's surreal humor. These are the kinds of jokes that make the episode more than just a simple plot. They add texture and a layer of meta-commentary that rewards attentive viewers. It's these hidden gems that often elevate an otherwise mediocre episode into something that's at least interesting to dissect. Okay, so the writers decided to give Peter a bizarre medical condition that affects his voice. What if they had gone in a completely different direction with that?
Instead of Peloton Balls, what if the high-pitched voice was actually a side effect of him trying to use a new experimental voice-changing app to impress Lois, and it backfired spectacularly? This would have tied into the Valentine's Day theme a little better, and it would have allowed for more direct jokes about Peter's vanity and his desperate attempts to be romantic. He could have been trying to sing a love song to Lois in a deep baritone, but instead he sounds like a chipmunk on helium. The comedy could have come from his inability to control his voice and the resulting misunderstandings. Or consider the church choir plot. What if instead of Peter being a good singer, he was terrible, and his high-pitched voice made him even worse, and the whole point was for the other choir boys to bully him for his lack of talent? Then, instead of Jesus showing up, maybe a rival choir from a different denomination shows up and has a musical battle with Peter's choir, and the stakes are incredibly high, like whoever wins gets control of the local bingo hall. It would have been a more absurd and less preachy take on the religious satire. The current version has moments, but it feels like a missed opportunity to really push the boundaries of the show's comedic potential. This episode gets a 5.7 out of 10. It's not a disaster, but it's far from a triumph. The 0.7 comes from the sheer audacity of the Peloton Balls concept and the Oliver Platt cameo, which were genuinely funny in their absurdity. What would have pushed it higher? A more cohesive storyline and less reliance on random character detours. This episode feels like it's for the die-hard fans who will watch anything, or perhaps for newcomers who want to see the show at its most bizarre and unhinged. It's not for people who want a well-crafted story or consistent humor. The final scene, with Peter waking up and talking about sleeping with Lois, only for Chris to ask about sending athlete's foot spray to Romania, is a perfect encapsulation of the episode. Disconnected, nonsensical, and ending on a note of pure, unadulterated weirdness, just like the initial chaos of Peter's voice suddenly changing, leaving us all wondering what exactly we just watched.